Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the AutoTalk weekly wrap. Again, we seem to have a lot of background noise for some reason, so who do I need to mute?
Yeah, I'm in a
Probably
hotel
Graham.
room here in Sydney.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll just live with it. That's all good. Episode 9. Now, just to introduce my usual crew, I'm Richard Edwards, the managing editor of AutoTalk. To my right or left, I still get confused by this, we have Matthew Hansen, our digital editor, and then on the far, I'm going to say right, bugger it, proving dedication to the cause by coming to us live from a airport hotel. Not a bad airport hotel though, normally, is Graham McDonald, who I guess is our random car dealer.
I'll live with that, Richard. That's a good enough title. And it's pouring with rain here in Sydney right now. It's cold, wet, and miserable.
It's not a lot different in Mangawhai, Matthew, down in Auckland.
Oh, Auckland's just terrible. Just throw it away. Give it away for the day.
Right, well, let's get on with the chat today. And if I could just... I wish I had a way to play some victory music, but we were right. We have a proposed scrappage scheme. So, last week with the emissions plans coming out, Monday this week with the emissions plans coming out, we got a confirmation of the $569 million clean car upgrade. Government's proposed a massive scrappage scheme in a bid to get older vehicles off the road in favour of new electrified vehicles. The announcement came Monday as part of the release of the long-awaited emissions reductions plan, alongside a range of measures including a scheme to lease low emissions vehicles to low-income households and additional funding for private vehicle alternatives. So let's run through this first. I mean, the rumours we're hearing is the amount you get for scrapping your old car is going to be potentially up to $12,000. Who knows? We know that there's going to be a trial first of 2,500 vehicles. What we don't know yet is pretty much anything else. How this is going to be done, who will technically be able to get it, though we're hearing that it is, I believe, low to medium income families, so people with up to $80,000 a year in income, I think I've heard the rumour. And that potentially it might be new cars only. Who knows? Graham, I'm guessing that latter one's a bit of a kick if it is true for the used car industry.
Yeah, it is. In a lot of different ways. And look, we've talked about this on and offline as well. Cash for clunkers in the States under the Obama administration, for example, and there was a similar scheme run in the UK. None of them actually served in the end for the original stated purpose. There was lots of unintended consequences, and there still are. And I think if you treat those sort of programs as an incentivization for manufacturers of motor vehicles, not distributors, but manufacturers, you can argue and say it would, in the case of the States, it stimulated production at a time when, during the GFC particularly, car sales had crashed through the floor. But then, of course, as we know what happened afterwards, those were not new sales. They were just sales that had been brought forward. And so it meant the market then went into a decline after the scheme had ended, because people that were going to buy a car in a year or two brought their purchases forward. They didn't go and buy another one in a year's time instead. I've got a lot of misgivings about the scheme. I think it's got the right intentions, but I think it's a very, very big hammer looking for a walnut to crack.
Matthew, not going to wreck the Civic Type R, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the girlfriend's car and thinking, what could we do with that? It's interesting. I mean, that could potentially amount to a fairly sizable discount on an EV if you chuck in rebate on top, assuming that they might get paired together. Maybe they cancel each other out. Who knows at this stage? After all these years of us talking about it for the New Zealand market, I'm kind of just keen to do it and just see what happens. But it does sound like it's going to be a bit of a logistical nightmare, going by all the reaction from the industry, what you've said, Graham, but also what people have been saying to you, Richard, over the course of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, from my take on it is I suspect the rumour of it being new cars only could be true. And I know a lot of the wording's been questionable about what it is. It's what's a new car. I think that's certainly a definition that needs to be looked at. And I do think that potentially, if New Zealand has legal parallel importing, they need to start looking at whether some late model used cars count in that frame. But I do understand why the government wouldn't want to throw such large sums of money at cars that are already a few years down the track. From my point of view, probably a controversial one, I guess. Yeah, I just don't know. I think they're focusing it so far on focusing it the way they are on those low to median income, that equity aspect. That concerns me a little bit. Isn't the game really just to get the most number of low emissions cars on the road? And arguably, if you open that up to a broader basis, aren't you potentially going to end up with just more of the outcome that you want?
Well, aren't we doing that already? I don't know. Again, I think the scheme is very altruistic, I suppose, and very optimistic, I guess. And there's a lot of different issues for the industry to work through on this one, not least of all supply of the vehicles that's supposedly going to be available. We know that's an issue coming up as well. But this sort of low-income, middle-income, particularly low-income talk, where you want to see, low-income or earners or beneficiaries moving themselves into brand new cars. Look, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring the non-socialist out of me here and say, well, really, are we now going to the point where there is actually more incentivization when it comes to vehicle purchasing to have no money and have no financial backing to get yourself a brand new car than people that actually work for it? I know it's a bit political in my sense, and I get the idea behind the scheme. I'm not completely anti it, but I just think, once again, we're just trying to whack people that are actually working really hard or got the means to finance a motor vehicle all by themselves and make their own choices. And instead, if you haven't got those sort of financial means, or you're poor at financial planning, or just your circumstances don't necessarily allow for a brand new car, you're the one that's going to be advantaged to this. And I have a problem with that. I really do have a problem with that. Cars or toasters?
I've had two people now come to me asking, most interested about when this is going to happen and how it's going to happen, and who actually had heard about the income limit on it before I had, and they were both retirees who very cashed up, plenty of money in the bank, but no income. So their theory being is, well, I earn less than $80,000 a year. Am I going to be able to go and get this? And that can be an interesting one. But it goes back round to, and if I look at our own situation, sorry, I mean, as a company, we have two older vehicles in the fleet that are probably getting pretty close to being sold back into the used market, but they could probably be quite easily scrapped. But this was open to businesses, this would actually speed up my process of replacing those vehicles with EVs, because I'm actually pretty much holding on to them until I can afford to replace them with EVs. So I think I don't think the scheme's that bad, but it needs to just be opened up. It needs to be opened up so that pretty much and I'm okay with the up to $80,000 in a vehicle aspect of it, so that anyone can go and take advantage of this and get an old car off the road, because that is it in the end of the game. It's improving statistically the cleanliness and safety of the fleet. It shouldn't matter who the cars go into the hands of. They're going to end up in the hands of lower to middle income families anyway once they hit the used market. Just open the bloody thing up. Anyway, for those who do have to drive a gas guzzler, like I'm driving this week.
Have to?
Have to, choose to, whatever. The government in the budget has extended the fuel tax cut. So extending reductions to fuel and excise duty and road user charges for a further 2 months, among measures to tackle the rising cost of living in this year's $5.9 billion budget announcement. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern and Finance Minister Grant Robertson say a strong economy and successful response to the pandemic has given New Zealand a solid base to accelerate the recovery and create a high-wage, low-carbon economy.
And the printing press churns on.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be very
quick on this.
Let's not get too political, but this is all just BS tinkering around the edges, isn't it? I mean, all you're doing by pumping more money into an economy that's got inflation, not high inflation in the context of the world scene, is you just create more inflation. So
I would have thought.
Yeah. I mean, we can't do jack all because the world is what it is, but. Yeah, I don't know. What are we going to spend our $117 a month on, guys?
Oh, the choices are unlimited. Maybe we could spend it on the because I reckon by the end of maybe not May, but maybe June, 98 octane fuel will be over $4 a litre. it might even be that way sooner than we think. So maybe I can just go and put some more money back into the fuel tank of the vehicle that I drive.
Yeah, Matthew, tank of gas for you.
I filled up the partner's car last night, a Toyota Auris, and it still costs $150 to do. Quick glance at Gatsby this morning, and I know Gatsby is a bit of a sort of, you take it with a grain of salt. It's user generated prices, but the majority seems to still be $2.95 for 91 and beyond. So even with the taxes being lessened, it's still extraordinarily expensive.
Well, the fuel price thing is for a very brief period actually relevant to me again, and that everyone knows I normally drive EV, but
do you? You don't really talk about it very much.
I've lost my company fuel. I've lost my company fuel card, unless you've got it, Matthew. And I'm driving a 5.6 litre Nissan Patrol. That is
I can hear the gas tolls ringing from here.
Shizzle storm. Yes, that is a very cool car for an old vehicle. That's a very cool car. But by the time I'd left doing all my meetings in Auckland after picking it up on Wednesday, I'd already used a quarter of a tank. So, anyway. On to the next stuff, and actually vehicle related. Renault New Zealand has dropped the Zoe from its lineup following the NCAP result. Renault New Zealand has dropped the fully electric Zoe from its lineup following the 0-star safety rating the model received from NCAP in December last year. As initially reported by motoringnz.com, Renault New Zealand General Manager Sam Waller confirmed that the decision stemmed directly from the Zoe's poor NCAP performance. I guess, but it is also perhaps to do with the fact that they really were only able to price that car at pretty much more than anything larger and Chinese or even Japanese for that matter.
There's
we drove one. We sorry, Matthew. So we drove one from Bluff up to Auckland, Richard, and that was a lot of fun. It was actually quite a cool little car for the job. But I certainly don't think we were thinking about safety when we were sort of hurtling down the Haas Pass on our way towards our hotel in Franz Josef, or midnight runs across from Rotorua, across the Mamakus and thunderstorms, watching the ESA meter with interest. But that's a very price-sensitive market now. Who would have thought we'd be talking about price sensitivity in the EV market?
Well, you can buy, and knowing what I know about the industry, you will be able to buy some very serious, significantly larger, better spec'd electric SUVs and hatchbacks for the same price or a heck of a lot less. We know Aura's coming, and from my guess on that, we're going to see cars with more space, more range, more spec than that Renault for some $10,000 to $15,000 less. It's just such a delicate time. But let's look at Renault in more general sense. They've just launched the Arcana. You went down to the South Island to drive that, Matthew. Can that car save Renault? Because there's not a lot of heck else in their passenger range. We hear that Koleos may be up for the chop soon. I mean, what do you think?
I mean, Renault, we don't really talk about them too much. They're not necessarily a New Zealand household name in terms of volume sales, but they had a really good year last year. They're boasting at the launch last year they had their best sales ever, which a lot of other brands did last year. And some of that's probably supply related and to do with a bit of how many cars were coming in and things like that. But the thing with the Arcana that's interesting, the Arcana's good. Just for a start, we drove that car from Nelson to Marlborough, and it did a lot of things right. It's interesting. It's got a sort of slick back coupe silhouette, which makes it a bit of a sort of outlier in that sort of 40 grand SUV market. What's interesting about it is it's made in Korea, not made in Europe. A lot of the other stuff they sell.
It's a Samsung.
So a lot of the stuff they sell is brought in from Europe, and they were talking at the launch that the Capture, which was updated last year, is now on hold for the New Zealand market because of primarily because of its European production and sort of the supply issues that they would see coming with bringing that car in. So if the Arcana's if where it comes from means steady supply, I see no reason why it can't sell just as well as a Koleos, maybe even better.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like the stuff that does make it here does seem to be generally more that Nissan Link stuff, I think, which is probably not necessarily a bad thing. Koleos is a great vehicle, a lot of value, but I think just people don't necessarily think of the Renault badge that much in the New Zealand market. Outside of the commercials, I think they do okay in commercials. The Duster, which of course is a Dacia, has been here and not done that well. It's just probably wrong spec and slightly incorrectly priced for the New Zealand market. I actually almost wonder whether Renault New Zealand should just make Renault a commercial brand and then bring very, very, very cut spec Dacias down here and just sell them on the price. That's my personal opinion. Like the Duster in Renault form, I think they couldn't get it for under about 28, 29 grand. It's the wrong car. It should have been a Dacia available in fridge white with steel wheels and black plastic bumpers.
Yeah, you buy it.
And it would probably still sell at $27,990. That's the thing. I've seen in the Middle East and up in Europe those base spec Dacia Dusters and things like that, and they are cool cars for virtue of what they are. But anyway,
fun fact: there is a madman running around West Auckland with a left hook Dacia Duster. I've seen him about 5 times. It's real.
Really?
Haven't done.
Look at that.
In the spec I've suggested, fridge white with black plastic bumpers and steel wheels.
Army green covered in dust, so almost as good.
Oh, almost as good.
It's probably up
for
from
anyone who doesn't know
Kerry
what to look
or
at,
something like that. Yeah.
just go jump on the internet and look for a Dacia Duster with the black plastic bumpers and steel wheels. They look the business. They don't look out of place in the desert. They for a cheap car that's probably based on like an old Renault Clio.
Here's the thing about Renault is irrespective whether the cars are good, bad, or indifferent, doesn't really matter. It's not a brand that anybody thinks of when they're going shopping for a motor vehicle. And they haven't been. Sorry, my computer's a bit wobbly on the little hotel desk I've got here.
That's okay.
And that's the biggest issue. It doesn't matter how good the car is. People don't think about buying a Renault. When they go and buy a brand new car, they think all the mainstream brands, but you've got to sort of think really hard. Oh, and there's a Renault. And then you sort of think, well, okay, given the number of cars they actually sell per annum in New Zealand, how much of the price you pay is sewn up in marketing budget on a per unit basis and a showroom basis and all the different things there too. The
less than you'd think.
Sale
less than you think.
high.
So Renault New Zealand is part of the broader, Hyundai New Zealand, Isuzu Ute empire, and my understanding is the number of people actually working Renault New Zealand is incredibly small. They have quite a great system over there of sharing resources. So yeah, I actually think the cars are pretty good value here. They've managed to get them in at a pretty decent price, but yeah, who knows? I think there's a lot of legacy issues with Renault in the market. I mean, if that brand gets relaunched one more time, it's almost a joke in the motoring industry in regards to Renault's relaunching again. But I think the Hyundai New Zealand group or the Spencer group have done probably the best effort we've seen with Renault in a long time. I think globally, hopefully, they can get a chance to access some of the better products that are out there. Because Renault has some cool products and some very cool products coming. The question is whether they'll be allowed to come to the New Zealand market.
Just don't buy the Russian ones.
Well, the new Renault Megane is kind of a hatchback / SUV with electric options, and apparently it's very, very good. So, yeah, we'll see. Now, a AADA conference coming up. So the subject of used import cars for new franchise dealers will be one of the topics raised in an industry panel discussion at the Australian Automotive Dealers Association Expo and Convention on June 3 at 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, or 5 p.m. New Zealand time. The panel will consider the question of whether Australian dealers embrace imported pre-owned vehicles. What are their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats in this area of the dealership business? Now, of course, why are we talking about this? Well, there's 2 things here. There's plenty of Kiwis going to AADA, and if you are, drop me an email at richard@automediagroup.co.nz because we're putting a big bar tab on the night before the conference in conjunction with AdTalk Edge. Secondly, we don't want these buggers competing for our cars, do we, Graham?
Oh, look, I'll just go and find another Graham. Hang on a second. Right, now you've got Graham in Australia on behalf of Aimva. Different hat, right? Well, it's an interesting point. So the reason I'm here is we've just held the Aimva, which is the Australian Imported Motor Vehicle Industry Association annual general meeting last night here in Sydney. It's the first AGM we've had in person since 2019. So quite a momentous sort of chance to get everyone back together again and talking about this stuff. And there's been a lot of work going on under the bridge, under the guise of COVID, I suppose. So if you think about the Australian marketplace, everything that you knew 2, 3, 4 years ago has changed. And we've got things, like global supply issues. We now definitely don't make cars anymore in Australia. And every time a Labor politician here in the election run-up talks about making cars in Australia again, I think everyone now just sort of globally sighs and thinks, just find a different record, would you? So they've got over that. So this new watershed, I suppose, is that globally, motor vehicles are in short supply. Used vehicle stocks in Australia are in very short supply. There are certainly issues going on between the distribution networks and their dealers. We know there's lots of friction there at the moment, and so it's like a perfect storm. If you're a motor vehicle dealer with a large holding in new and used stock, at the moment I think you're scratching your head thinking, well, what do I need to do? Like, what can I possibly do now to help my business, if not grow, at least stay static in the number of vehicles I can offer for sale? What else is there? If we're not making them, if we're not selling them, we're not importing them, numbers are down there because we can't obtain stock, all the other factors. Suddenly the idea of having a separate pool of late model, probably, let's say, environmentally friendly vehicles available could be a new branch on the tree for them. And it'll be really interesting to see how that dialogue goes in the next couple of days.
I think it's going to be absolute minefield because, the relationship between dealers and distributors in Australia around franchise agreements, and there's actual laws around franchise agreements in Australia. It's going to be a really complex situation over there, let alone before you start adding that additional competition into the market here. I guess the one thing that will be a positive about it is, again, that potential for Australian dealers to get electric vehicle products that they simply can't get. We're seeing brands now just skip Australia in regards to electric, which is not a good thing for New Zealand either, I guess. But yeah, just it's an interesting one. It's I'm actually slightly shocked that the AADA is tackling this one as part of their conference. Seems a very interesting thing for a primarily new vehicle franchise-driven organisation to be doing. So,
I think what you're saying, Richard, is the result of a really fractious couple of years in the industry, and finally, irrespective of whether the regulator in the past has been hostile towards the idea of what we call mainstream vehicles, I think there's a little bit of a peak of light over the horizon now that people are starting to work out that it doesn't really matter what the regulator thinks. It doesn't really matter what the distributor channels think. There may be alternative options. And I would say the next 6 months are going to be really interesting over here in Australia about where that direction heads.
Yeah. We've actually had a comment through the LinkedIn channel from Mr. Richard Bosserman, who Matthew and I know well, who's pointed out that he did some of the reporting on the story we were talking about before the Renault, that Renault New Zealand has dropped the Duster as well. Yep, we're aware of that. It's sad. I wish there was more for that vehicle. But anyway. Now, a last very quick one. We are getting another charging brand in New Zealand. So, like home streaming, charging is getting a little bit fractured. Australian-based global EV charging company Jolt will in July start rolling out a fast EV charging network around New Zealand, offering the first 7 kilowatts free. The first 25 kilowatt EV fast chargers will be installed at Mitre 10 stores and retail locations in Auckland, Wellington, and Christchurch this year. I'm going to cut this one off real short, and I'm going to go and actually see the guy at Jolt in Australia and bang on his table. No free charging. No free DC charging. AC charging, yes. Free DC charging is bad. When will people learn this? Vector New Zealand, if you're listening, stop the free DC charging. It ruins the batteries on Leafs because people DC charge too much. It creates terrible behavior at things, and it just warps the whole sense of everything. And no one is going to sit at a charger and watch the video ads, Mr. Jolt. Not in New Zealand. Because...
Oh, you're kidding. Really?
That's what's paying for it. They've got big monitors with ads and stuff that are going to play. Apparently, that's going to pay for it all.
Yeah.
It's an Australian company, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess the video ads is a model that may work in America and in Australia. But in New Zealand, we have a slightly different system when we're fueling our cars. We can click the little thing on and not stand there when we're putting petrol in our cars. So in America, you will watch video ads because you've got to stand there holding the handle. In Australia, it's the same deal. Here, we have a little thing. We can click them and walk away. And we do. We go wash our windscreen or whatever. But
we smart Kiwis.
I love the intent. But I just think we're a bit past that. And I think another charging network, good. Competition is great. No concern with that. I mean, the charging around the corner from me has risen to 45 cents a kilowatt. But it'll improve output. But I just think just charge for that 70 kilowatts. Give a discount, sure. Give a loyalty program, sure. Maybe a bit off if you have a receipt from Mitre 10. But please, just charge for charging. Anyway, with that, Graham, we'll let you head off. How you got to fly back today or tomorrow, or what's the?
I'm going to go and pull a negative rat now. So I'm going to go into the lottery drawer over here to pull a negative rat test so I can actually get home. Interesting, actually, just a sort of a little side story to that for those that are traveling to Australia, or other, particularly Australia. So I went through the whole process of obtaining my international vaccine passport and my documentation and all the bits and pieces, and I had it all lined up. I just walked straight on through the airport. It was crickets. So I'm sure there are checks and balances done, I guess. But it's really interesting just to sort of see the lack of. And the minute you walk out into the airport terminal, there's not one person wearing a mask apart from their employees as well. So I sort of felt like a bit of a pariah. Interesting times. But no, I'm going to go and do a negative rat now.
All good. No worries. Well, you enjoy, and Matthew, you go get back to work, and I'm going to go and jump into a very long Zoom meeting. Right. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. We'll catch you again next week, hopefully at actually 10 a.m. as opposed to 5 past 10. And thanks to all those who are watching this after. Catch you later.
All right. Good morning.